Racist cop pulls over black woman, freezes when he finds out she's his new boss. In this compelling and thought-provoking video, we delve into a dramatic encounter that challenges perceptions and underscores the importance of equality and justice. Watch as a routine traffic stop takes an unexpected turn, revealing the deep-seated issues of racism and bias that persist in our society. This gripping story begins with a black woman being pulled over by a police officer, an all-too-common occurrence that many minorities face daily. However, what unfolds next is both shocking and enlightening. If you are enthusiastic about this narrative, please inform us. If you appreciated the video, press 1. If not, select 0. Your feedback genuinely motivates me to collect additional uplifting and significant narratives.
Peace. Captain Amelia Johnson, a highly respected figure in the city's police force, was driving through the suburban neighborhood in her sleek, navy blue SUV. Today wasn't about work, it was about family. She was heading to her niece, Lila's 7th birthday party, eager to see the smile that always lit up the little girl's face. Dressed casually in a white blouse and dark jeans, Amelia could have passed for any other citizen on the road. Her badge and gun were tucked away in her bag, her hair pulled back into a neat ponytail. It was a rare day off, and she intended to savor every moment of it. Despite her high-ranking position as the first black female captain in the city's history, Amelia was a deeply grounded person. Her dedication to justice was rivaled only by her commitment to her family, who had always been her anchor in the storm of her career. The SUV's engine purred softly as she maneuvered down the quiet streets, her GPS guiding her through the unfamiliar suburb. She had chosen to take a scenic route, appreciating the beauty of the tree-lined roads and the charm of the small community. As she drove, her mind wandered to the day ahead. Lila's excited chatter, the smell of barbecue in the air, and the laughter of family gathered together. For a moment, Amelia allowed herself to forget the weight of her responsibilities, focusing instead on the simple joy of the day. But as she approached an intersection, her peaceful drive was interrupted by the sharp flash of red and blue lights in her rearview mirror. The sudden wail of a siren shattered the morning calm, and Amelia's heart sank. She pulled over to the side of the road, her brow furrowing in confusion. There was no way she had been speeding, and her vehicle registration was up to date. What could this possibly be about? A glance in her side mirror revealed a white police officer stepping out of the patrol car. He was tall and stocky, his uniform crisp and his demeanor authoritative. His name badge read Officer Daniels. As he approached her car, Amelia noticed the stiff set of his shoulders and the sharp look in his eyes. Something about his expression sent a prickle of unease down her spine. "Good morning, ma'am," he said curtly, stopping beside her window. "License and registration, please." Amelia smiled politely, reaching into her glove compartment for the requested documents. "Of course, officer. May I ask why I'm being pulled over?" Officer Daniels' lips pressed into a thin line. "We'll get to that. Just hand over your license and registration." She complied without argument, handing him the documents and watching as he inspected them with a scrutinizing gaze. There was a long pause before he looked back at her, his eyes narrowing. "Where are you headed this morning?" he asked, his tone sharp. "To my niece's birthday party," Amelia replied, keeping her voice calm and even. "Is there a problem, officer?" Daniels didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced at her SUV, his eyes lingering on the luxury interior visible through the open window. His expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. "This your vehicle?" he asked. "Yes, it is," Amelia said, her patience beginning to wear thin. "Why do you ask?" Daniels straightened, his hand resting on the holster of his gun. "We've had reports of a vehicle matching this description involved in suspicious activity in the area. I'm going to need you to step out of the car." Amelia's stomach tightened. She knew her rights and was well aware that she didn't have to step out of her vehicle unless there was probable cause. But she also knew that escalating the situation could lead to unnecessary conflict, especially given the tense dynamic between law enforcement and communities of color. Reluctantly, She unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out of the SUV. As she stood on the side of the road, Daniels gave her a once-over, his eyes narrowing further. Amelia could feel the weight of his gaze, a mixture of suspicion and condescension. "Mind if I search the vehicle?" he asked, his hand still resting on his gun. "Yes, I do mind," Amelia said firmly, crossing her arms. "Unless you have a warrant or reasonable suspicion, you have no right to search my car." Daniel's jaw tightened, and his expression darkened. "Ma'am, I'm just doing my job. If you've got nothing to hide, you shouldn't have a problem with this." Amelia's eyes locked onto his, her calm demeanor unwavering. "And I'm exercising my rights as a citizen. If you suspect me of a crime, state it clearly. Otherwise, I'd like to continue on my way." The tension between them was palpable, drawing the attention of a few passers-by who slowed down to watch the scene unfold. Amelia could feel her heart pounding in her chest, but she refused to let it show. She had faced far greater challenges in her career than an overzealous officer on a power trip. Daniels seemed taken aback by her composure, his brow furrowing as he struggled to assert his authority. "Look, Mom," he said, his tone edging toward irritation. "I'm just trying to keep this community safe. If you don't cooperate, I'll have no choice but to bring you in for questioning." Amelia raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a faint smile. "Bring me in," she repeated, her voice laced with quiet confidence. "Officer Daniels, do you have any idea who I am?" Her question caught him off guard, and he hesitated, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. "I don't see how that's relevant," he said stiffly. Amelia took a step closer, her gaze steady and unyielding. "I'm Captain Amelia Johnson, head of the Metropolitan Police Department's Criminal Investigations Division. I spent over 20 years on the force, and I know every protocol, every law, and every right that protects citizens from unwarranted harassment. So, Officer Daniels, I suggest you think very carefully about your next move." The color drained from Daniels' face as the weight of her words sank in. His hand dropped away from his gun, and he took a step back, his posture suddenly uncertain. "See, Captain Johnson," he stammered, his earlier bravado evaporating. I didn't realize." "That much is clear," Amelia said, her tone cool but firm. "And I suggest you take this as a learning opportunity. Your job is to protect and serve, not to intimidate and harass." Daniels swallowed hard, his eyes darting to the onlookers who had gathered to witness the exchange. The realization that he had just humiliated himself in front of an audience and a superior officer seemed to hit him like a ton of bricks. "I apologize, man," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It won't happen again." Amelia nodded, her expression softening slightly. "See that it doesn't," she said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a birthday party to attend." She turned and got back into her SUV, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the steering wheel. The encounter had been brief but intense, a stark reminder of the challenges she faced as both a black woman and a high-ranking officer. As she drove away, leaving Daniels to grapple with the consequences of his actions, she couldn't help but think about the systemic changes that still needed to happen within the force she had dedicated her life to. But for now, there was work to be done, and a little girl waiting for her favorite aunt to bring the cake. A ripple through the department. Captain Amelia Johnson drove away from the scene, her SUV purring along the suburban roads. Although she kept her face composed and her hands steady on the wheel, her mind churned with thoughts of the encounter. The arrogance of Officer Daniels, his lack of protocol, and his overt suspicion spoke to deeper issues within the force she had worked tirelessly to improve. Arriving at her sister's home, Amelia parked in the driveway and stepped out. The sound of children laughing greeted her, and she felt the tension in her shoulders begin to dissipate. Family gatherings always brought her back to her roots, grounding her in the love and support she cherished. Leela's face lit up as she spotted Amelia walking toward the backyard with a brightly wrapped gift in hand. "Aunt Amelia," the little girl squealed, running to throw her arms around her. "Happy birthday, my princess," Amelia said warmly, lifting her niece into a hug. "I've got something special for you." The momentary joy of the celebration, however, was clouded by her lingering thoughts about Officer Daniels. As she sat with her family, enjoying the warm breeze and the aroma of barbecue, she replayed the encounter in her mind. The prejudice, the power imbalance, and the thin veneer of authority Daniels had tried to assert were all too familiar patterns she had fought against her entire career. Today wasn't just an incident. It was a reminder that the battle was far from over. By the time Amelia returned to her home that evening, her phone was already buzzing with messages. She frowned as she unlocked it, scrolling through the flood of emails and notifications. Among them was a formal report submitted by Officer Daniels, an account of the morning's interaction. The language was carefully worded, attempting to justify his actions as part of routine checks. But Amelia could see through the lines. It was a defensive maneuver to protect himself from any potential fallout. Amelia sighed. She could handle this quietly, filing it away as another example of implicit bias and poor judgment. But that wasn't her style. She had risen to the rank of captain, not by avoiding tough conversations, but by confronting them head-on. This was no different. The following morning, Amelia arrived at the precinct earlier than usual. She wore her uniform, her captain's badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. As she walked through the halls, officers and staff greeted her with respect, some stepping aside to make way. Her reputation as a strong but fair leader preceded her. She entered the conference room, where a routine departmental briefing was scheduled to take place. It was already filled with officers, including Daniels, who sat near the back, his posture tense. Amelia's presence commanded attention, and the chatter in the room quieted as she took her place at the head of the table. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice calm but firm. "Before we dive into today's agenda, I need to address an incident that occurred yesterday. It involves one of our own, and a lapse in judgment that could have escalated into something far more serious." The room fell silent. All eyes were on her as she continued, her gaze sweeping over the group. "Yesterday morning, I was pulled over by Officer Daniels under the pretense of suspicion," she said. "What followed was a display of behavior that does not align with the standards we hold ourselves to as law enforcement officers. It was a reminder that bias, whether conscious or unconscious, still permeates our ranks, and that is unacceptable." Daniels shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his face reddening. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but quickly shut it, realizing that interrupting her would only worsen the situation. Amelia didn't call him out by name, but her words were clear. As officers of the law, we have an immense responsibility to serve and protect all members of our community, regardless of their race, gender, or socioeconomic status. Our authority is not a weapon to be wielded against those we perceive as different. It is a privilege granted to us by the people we serve, and it must be exercised with integrity and respect. One of the senior officers, Lieutenant Ramirez, raised his hand. "Captain, if I may," he said, his tone cautious. "Are you suggesting we need additional training on implicit bias?" Amelia nodded. "I'm not just suggesting it, Lieutenant. I'm mandating it. Effective immediately, every officer in this precinct will undergo a comprehensive program on bias awareness and de-escalation techniques. This is not optional. It's necessary." There were murmurs of agreement and some grumbles of dissent. Amelia anticipated resistance. Change was never easy, especially in an institution steeped in tradition. But she was resolute. "Furthermore," she continued, "I will personally review the protocols we follow during traffic stops and other civilian interactions. It's imperative that we hold ourselves to the highest standard of professionalism. Mistakes happen, yes, but we must learn from them and strive to do better." Daniel's face was pale now, his earlier bravado completely gone. He avoided Amelia's gaze, staring down at his hands. Amelia decided to address him directly, though her tone remained professional. "Officer Daniels," she said, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. "I reviewed your report from yesterday. While I appreciate your willingness to document the interaction, I believe there's room for growth in how you approach situations like these in the future. I'd like to meet with you privately after this briefing to discuss it further." Daniels nodded stiffly. "Yes, Captain," he muttered, his voice barely audible. After the meeting, Amelia returned to her office, where Daniels appeared a short while later, looking nervous but determined. He stood at attention as she gestured for him to sit. "Officer Daniels," she began, "let me start by saying this. I understand that being a police officer is not an easy job. It requires split-second decisions and a constant balance between authority and empathy. But yesterday, your actions crossed a line." Daniels nodded, his face contrite. "I realize that now, Captain. I made assumptions I shouldn't have, and I'm sorry." Amelia leaned forward, her expression softening slightly. "Apologies are a good start, but they're not enough. What matters is what you do moving forward. I need you to understand that this isn't just about you and me. It's about the trust we build, or fail to build, with the community. Every interaction counts, Daniels. Every single one." He nodded again, his voice earnest. "I want to do better, Captain. I really do." Amelia studied him for a moment before replying. "Then prove it. Take this as an opportunity to grow. Attend the training sessions, reflect on your biases, and show me, and the community, that you're committed to being the best officer you can be. I'll be watching, Daniels." "Yes, ma'am," he said, his voice steady. As Daniels left her office, Amelia felt a flicker of hope. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but it had to start somewhere. If she could turn this incident into a catalyst for growth, then perhaps it would ripple outward, inspiring others to examine their own actions and assumptions. Leaning back in her chair, Amelia allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. She had faced the storm head-on, as she always did. Now, it was time to move forward, one step at a time. The ripple effects of accountability. The tension from the departmental meeting hadn't fully dissipated as Captain Amelia Johnson leaned back in her chair that evening, reviewing the notes she had taken during her follow-up discussion with Officer Daniels. The day had been long, emotionally charged, and draining. Yet it was days like this that reminded Amelia of why she had taken up the badge in the first place. She wasn't just here to uphold the law. She was here to rebuild trust and lead with integrity. By the next morning, word of the meeting had spread through the precinct like wildfire. Officers, clerks, and even janitorial staff exchanged whispers about Captain Johnson's address. Some admired her firm stance, while others bristled at what they considered a harsh spotlight on the force. The whispers didn't faze Amelia. If her leadership ruffled feathers, so be it. Progress always came with resistance. As the sun climbed higher into the sky, Amelia sat in her office, her fingers tapping rhythmically on her keyboard as she drafted a formal memorandum outlining the new training initiative. Her focus was unwavering until a soft knock on the door broke her concentration. "Come in," she called, her voice calm. The door creaked open, revealing Lieutenant Ramirez, one of the senior officers in the precinct. Ramirez was a seasoned cop with a reputation for being both fair and pragmatic. He carried himself with a quiet confidence that often brought balance to tense situations. Today, however, he seemed unusually thoughtful, his brow furrowed as he stepped inside. "Captain, do you have a moment?" he asked. Amelia gestured to the chair opposite her desk. "Of course, Lieutenant. What's on your mind?" Ramirez sat down, folding his hands neatly on his lap. "I wanted to talk about the training you mentioned yesterday. I think it's a step in the right direction, but I've been hearing some grumbling among the younger officers. They feel like they're being singled out." Amelia nodded, unsurprised. "Change always makes people uncomfortable," she said. "But this isn't about singling anyone out. It's about making sure we're all operating from a place of understanding and accountability." "I get that," Ramirez said, "and I fully support it. But I think we need to be careful about how we roll this out. If we frame it the wrong way, it could create more resistance instead of progress." Amelia leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. What do you suggest? Maybe we start with small groups, Ramirez said. Make the sessions more interactive, more personal. Let the officers share their own experiences, their struggles. If they feel like they're being heard, they'll be more open to change. Amelia considered his words carefully. Ramirez had a point. Effective change required not just instruction, but also engagement. That's a good idea, she said finally. I'll reach out to some trainers who specialize in this kind of work. If we can make the sessions feel less like lectures and more like conversations, we might be able to break through some of that resistance. Ramirez nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. I think that'll go a long way, Captain. And for what it's worth, I think what you're doing is exactly what this department needs. As the week progressed, the ripple effects of Amelia's actions began to spread beyond the precinct. News of her confrontation with Officer Daniels and her push for bias training reached the local community, sparking a wave of discussion about police reform. Some praised her for her courage, while others questioned whether such measures would make a real difference. Amelia found herself invited to speak at a community forum organized by a local advocacy group. The event was held in a modest community center, its walls adorned with posters promoting unity and justice. Amelia arrived early, taking a moment to greet the organizers and familiarize herself with the space. The room gradually filled with a diverse crowd: parents, students, business owners, and even a few off-duty officers. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation as Amelia took her place at the front of the room, her polished demeanor masking the nervous energy simmering beneath the surface. Public speaking wasn't her favorite part of the job, but she knew the importance of showing up, of being a visible part of the conversation. A woman from the advocacy group, a petite but commanding figure named Marcia, introduced her. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcia said, her voice steady, we are honored to have with us tonight Captain Amelia Johnson, a leader who is proving that real change begins within the system itself. As the applause rippled through the room, Amelia stepped up to the podium. She took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the faces in the audience. Some looked hopeful, others skeptical, but all were here because they cared about the same thing: progress. Thank you, Marcia, Amelia began. And thank you to everyone here tonight for taking the time to engage in what I hope will be a meaningful dialogue. I won't pretend that I have all the answers, but I want to share with you some of the steps we're taking to address the challenges within our department. She spoke about the new training initiative, emphasizing its focus on building empathy and understanding. She shared her belief that effective policing required not just enforcing the law, but fostering trust and collaboration with the community. As she spoke, she could see the tension in the room begin to ease, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. When she opened the floor for questions, the first to speak was an older man with a cane. His voice was tinged with frustration as he recounted an experience of being unfairly targeted by police. Captain, I've been stopped more times than I can count, just for walking in my own neighborhood. How can we trust that things will change? Amelia met his gaze, her voice steady. I won't insult you by saying it'll happen overnight. Change is slow, and trust even slower. But I can promise you this. I'm committed to doing everything in my power to make sure every officer in my precinct understands the weight of their responsibility, and I'll hold them accountable if they fall short. The man nodded, his expression softening slightly. I'll hold you to that, Captain. The next question came from a young woman who worked as a teacher. How can we, as civilians, help support this change? Amelia smiled. By continuing to show up, just like you're doing tonight. By holding us accountable, but also by engaging with us. Change doesn't happen in isolation. It takes a community working together. After the forum, Amelia lingered to speak with attendees one-on-one. She listened to their stories, their fears, and their hopes, each conversation reinforcing her commitment to the work ahead. By the time she left, the sun had dipped below the horizon, the air cool and quiet once again. As she drove home, her thoughts turned to the precinct. The changes she was implementing were just the beginning, a foundation upon which to build something better. She thought of Officer Daniels, who had already approached her that morning to thank her for the conversation they'd had. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he admitted. "I want to do better." It was a small victory, but one that gave her hope. If she could reach him, maybe she could reach others too. Pulling into her driveway, Amelia felt a sense of quiet resolve. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but she was ready. For her department, for her community, and for the countless people who believed in her, she would keep fighting. And this was only the beginning. Cracks began to show. The atmosphere in the precinct was different the morning after the community forum. Conversations were quieter, glances lingered longer, and the air was thick with unspoken tension. Captain Amelia Johnson could feel the weight of her decision to enforce bias training pressing against the walls of the department. Change always met resistance, but she was prepared for it. What she hadn't anticipated, however, was the ripple effect it would have on her own team. She sat at her desk, reviewing the revised traffic stop protocols she had requested from her senior staff. The document was thorough, emphasizing accountability and clear guidelines for de-escalation. Amelia had no doubt it would improve interactions between officers and civilians, but she also knew it would feel restrictive to those who preferred to wield unchecked authority. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. "Come in," she said, looking up to see Lieutenant Ramirez. "Morning, Captain," he said, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. His face was serious, his usual calm demeanor replaced by something more urgent. "We've got a situation brewing." Amelia set her papers aside, giving him her full attention. "What kind of situation?" Ramirez hesitated before speaking. "Some of the officers are unhappy about the new policies. They're saying the training sessions are unnecessary, that it's a punishment for something they didn't do." Amelia frowned. "Unnecessary? Ramirez, you were at that meeting. You saw how Officer Daniels handled that traffic stop. That wasn't an isolated incident. This is about preventing situations like that from happening again." "I know," Ramirez said quickly, "and I agree with you. But there's a group of them who feel like this is targeting them personally. They're talking about pushing back, subtle things, like dragging their feet on paperwork or taking longer to respond to calls. Nothing outright insubordinate, but enough to slow things down." Amelia's jaw tightened. This was exactly the kind of behavior she had hoped to avoid. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Lieutenant. I'll address it." Later that day, Amelia called a departmental meeting. The officers filed into the conference room with varying degrees of enthusiasm, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright defiance. Officer Daniels was among them, his posture less tense than it had been the last time they were all in this room. He offered Amelia a faint nod as he took his seat, a gesture she acknowledged with a slight incline of her head. Amelia stood at the front of the room, her presence commanding as she waited for the murmurs to die down. When silence fell, she began. "I've heard some concerns about the changes we're implementing," she said, her tone calm but firm. "Let me be clear, these changes are not about targeting anyone. They are about raising the standards of this department to ensure that we are serving our community with the respect and integrity they deserve." A hand shot up from the back of the room. It belonged to Officer Harlan, a grizzled veteran who had been with the precinct for over 2 decades. "Captain," he said, his voice tinged with irritation, "with all due respect, I've been doing this job longer than some of these rookies have been alive. I know how to handle myself out there. I don't need a lecture on bias or de-escalation." Amelia met his gaze steadily. "And yet, Officer Harlan, incidents like the one with Officer Daniels continue to happen. This isn't about questioning your experience. It's about ensuring that every single person in this department is equipped to handle situations with fairness and professionalism. No exceptions." Harlan muttered something under his breath, but he didn't argue further. Amelia continued, her voice unwavering. "I understand that change is uncomfortable. I understand that some of you may feel like this is unnecessary or even insulting, but I need you to ask yourselves this: are you here to protect and serve, or are you here to assert power without accountability? Because this department doesn't have room for the latter. The room was silent, her words hanging heavy in the air. Amelia let the weight of her statement settle before continuing. This training isn't a punishment, it's an opportunity. An opportunity for all of us to grow, to challenge our assumptions, and to become better officers. It's not about what you've done in the past, it's about what we can do better moving forward. Another officer, a younger woman named Officer Rodriguez, raised her hand. Captain, I agree with the need for change, but how do we address the public's perception of us? Even when we try to do things right, some people still see us as the enemy. Amelia nodded, appreciating the sincerity of the question. That's a valid concern, Officer Rodriguez, and it's not something we can fix overnight. Trust is earned through consistent actions, not words. It's about showing up, day after day, and treating every person we encounter with dignity and respect. We can't control how people see us, but we can control how we behave. The room remained quiet, the officers absorbing her words. Amelia glanced around, gauging their reactions. There were still traces of resistance, but she could also see glimmers of understanding, particularly in the younger officers. Change was a process, and this was just the beginning. As the meeting ended and the officers began to file out, Amelia caught sight of Officer Daniels lingering near the door. She approached him, her expression softening. "Daniels," she said, her voice quieter now. "How are you holding up?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "It's been a lot to think about, Captain. But I've been trying. That training session yesterday really made me realize some things." Amelia smiled faintly. "Good. That's all I ask, for you to try. Change doesn't happen all at once. It's about taking it one step at a time." Daniels nodded, his posture more relaxed than it had been since their initial encounter. "Thank you, Captain, for giving me a chance to do better." "You've earned it, Daniels," she said. "Keep at it." Despite the progress being made within the precinct, Amelia knew that her efforts weren't confined to the walls of the department. The community was watching closely, their trust fragile and their expectations high. It wasn't enough to implement change internally. She needed to bridge the gap between the police and the people they served. That evening, Amelia attended another community event, this one hosted by a local youth center. The turnout was even larger than the forum, with families, activists, and business leaders packed into the modest gymnasium. Amelia took the stage alongside several other community leaders, each of them speaking about the importance of unity and collaboration. When it was her turn to speak, Amelia addressed the crowd with the same honesty and conviction she had shown at the precinct. She spoke about the challenges of reform, the resistance she had faced, and the progress she was determined to make. She didn't shy away from the difficulties, but she also emphasized the hope she felt for the future. "We're not perfect," she said, her voice steady, "but we're trying. And with your support, we can do better. Change doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when we work together." Her words were met with applause, and as she stepped off the stage, several attendees approached her to share their thoughts. Some thanked her for her efforts, while others voiced their concerns, their skepticism still evident. Amelia listened to each of them, her commitment unwavering. Back at home that night, Amelia reflected on the day's events. Progress was being made, but it was slow and painstaking. The resistance within her department and a lingering mistrust from the community were constant reminders of the work that still lay ahead. But she also saw glimmers of hope, officers like Daniels beginning to change, community members willing to engage, and the faintest signs of a bridge being built. She sat at her desk, jotting down notes for the next steps in her plan. She knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but she was ready. For her, this wasn't just about her career or her reputation. It was about leaving a legacy of integrity, justice, and accountability. As she put down her pen and leaned back in her chair, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The cracks in the system were beginning to show, but rather than seeing them as weaknesses, Amelia saw them as opportunities. Opportunities to rebuild, to strengthen, and to create something better. And she wasn't going to stop until that vision became a reality. The fire of resistance. The precinct buzzed with an energy that Captain Amelia Johnson had come to recognize all too well. It wasn't the urgency of a breaking case or the camaraderie that sometimes filled the halls during quieter days. This was different, subtle but palpable. A resistance, simmering just beneath the surface, had begun to take shape. Despite her best efforts to inspire cooperation and understanding, there were those within the department who were unwilling to embrace the changes she was spearheading. Amelia arrived early that morning, her steps measured, her mind focused. She had spent the previous evening reviewing data on traffic stops, arrests, and complaints lodged against officers. The numbers painted a troubling picture: racial disparities, patterns of excessive force, and inconsistencies in how policies were being applied. It was data she had always known existed, but seeing it laid out in black and white reignited her determination. By mid-morning, Amelia was deep in conversation with Lieutenant Ramirez in her office. The door was slightly ajar, a small concession she made to maintain an air of transparency. Ramirez, who had become one of her most trusted confidants, sat across from her, his brow furrowed in thought. "We're making progress, Captain," Ramirez said, his tone measured. "But it's slow, too slow. The younger officers are receptive, but some of the veterans, they're digging in their heels." Amelia sighed, leaning back in her chair. "I expected resistance, Ramirez, but I didn't expect them to undermine the work we're doing. Delayed reports, missed training sessions, and now I hear rumors of a few officers intentionally avoiding assignments in certain neighborhoods." Ramirez nodded grimly. "I've heard the same. They're not saying it outright, but it's clear they're trying to send a message." Amelia's jaw tightened. They can send all the messages they want, but they're not going to derail this. If they think I'm going to back down, they don't know me at all. Before Ramirez could respond, there was a knock at the door. Officer Daniels stepped in, his expression hesitant but determined. "Captain, do you have a moment?" Amelia gestured for him to enter. "Of course, Daniels. What's on your mind?" Daniels glanced at Ramirez before taking the seat. "I wanted to talk about the training sessions," he said. "I've been attending, and, honestly, it's opened my eyes to a lot of things I didn't realize before. But not everyone feels the same way. There's a group of officers who've been talking about pushing back. They're saying the training is a waste of time, that it's an attack on the way we've always done things." Amelia's eyes narrowed. "Do you have names?" Daniels hesitated, his discomfort evident. "I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, Captain, but I thought you should know. They're not just talking among themselves. They're starting to influence others." Ramirez leaned forward. "This could get out of hand if we don't address it." Amelia nodded. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Daniels. I'll handle it." That afternoon, Amelia called an unscheduled meeting with the senior officers. The atmosphere in the conference room was tense, the unspoken tension filling the air like a storm cloud. She stood at the head of the table, her gaze sweeping over the faces of the men and women who were supposed to be her allies in this effort. "I've heard the rumblings," she began, her voice calm but firm. "I know there are those among us who feel that the changes we're making are unnecessary or even harmful. Let me be clear. These changes are not optional. They are not up for debate. They are essential to the integrity of this department and to the trust of the community we serve." A low murmur spread through the room, but no one spoke up. Amelia continued, her tone sharpening. "If you feel that you cannot support these initiatives, I suggest you take a long, hard look at why you joined this force in the first place. This job is not about power or authority. It's about service. And if you can't uphold that principle, then this is not the place for you." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Amelia scanned the room, her gaze landing on Officer Harlan, who had been one of the most vocal critics of the new policies. His face was set in a stubborn frown, but he said nothing. "This department will not tolerate insubordination," Amelia said, her voice steady. "We will not tolerate bias, and we will not tolerate anything less than the highest standard of professionalism. If you can't meet those standards, you are free to leave." The room was silent as the officers filed out, their expressions a mix of anger, resignation, and grudging respect. Amelia stayed behind, her hands gripping the edge of the table as she took a moment to steady herself. She knew she had just drawn a line in the sand, and there would be consequences, but she also knew it was necessary. Over the next few days, the tension in the precinct reached a boiling point. Some officers doubled down on their resistance, while others began to reconsider their positions. Amelia stayed the course, holding firm to her principles and refusing to back down. One morning, as she was reviewing case files in her office, Ramirez burst in, his face pale. "Captain," he said urgently, "we've got a situation." Amelia set down her pen, her pulse quickening. "What is it?" "There was an incident during a traffic stop," Ramirez said. "Harlan was involved. It escalated badly." Amelia's stomach dropped. "How badly?" Ramirez hesitated before answering. The civilian filed a formal complaint. They're accusing Harlan of using excessive force. And there's body cam footage. Amelia stood, her mind racing. "Get me the footage. Now." Within the hour, Amelia was watching the footage in her office, her heart sinking with every passing second. The video showed Harlan pulling over a young black man for a minor infraction. The stop quickly escalated, with Harlan raising his voice, issuing unnecessary commands, and ultimately pulling the man out of his car and forcing him to the ground. Amelia's hands tightened into fists as she watched. This was exactly what she had been trying to prevent, and it had happened under her watch. She called Ramirez back into her office. "This ends now," she said, her voice like steel. "Harlan is to be placed on administrative leave effective immediately. Launch an internal investigation and notify the civilian that their complaint is being taken seriously." Ramirez nodded. "Understood, Captain." Amelia leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. This wasn't just about Harlan. It was about the culture that had allowed behavior like this to go unchecked for so long. She had already started to chip away at that culture, but now she needed to take a sledgehammer to it. She picked up her phone and began drafting a message to the entire department. It was time for a reckoning. That evening, as Amelia sat alone in her office, she reflected on the events of the day. The resistance within her department was stronger than she had anticipated, but so was her resolve. She knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but she was ready to face it. For her, this wasn't just about fixing a broken system. It was about building something better, something stronger, and she wasn't going to stop until that vision became a reality. The reckoning and redemption. The following weeks brought an intensity to Captain Amelia Johnson's life that even she, with her years of experience, had rarely faced. The fallout from Officer Harlan's traffic stop had rippled through the precinct, the community, and the media like wildfire. The body cam footage had leaked, sparking outrage and renewed calls for reform. For Amelia, it wasn't just another scandal to manage. It was a defining moment in her career and a test of her vision for what law enforcement could be. The morning after Harlan was placed on administrative leave, Amelia arrived at the precinct earlier than usual. The sun had barely risen, but she could feel the weight of the day pressing on her shoulders. She knew the department was divided. Some officers respected her decisive action, while others whispered about betrayal and overreach. The community, meanwhile, waited with bated breath, skeptical that real accountability would follow. As Amelia walked through the halls, she noticed the way conversations hushed as she passed, the way officers avoided her gaze. She felt their unease, their resentment, but she didn't let it shake her. She wasn't here to win popularity contests. She was here to lead. By mid-morning, Amelia stood at the front of the conference room, addressing the entire department in what she had declared an emergency meeting. The tension was thick, the air heavy with anticipation. "I won't sugarcoat this," Amelia began, her voice steady but firm. "The events of the past few weeks have brought this department under intense scrutiny. Officer Harlan's actions were unacceptable, and they have damaged the trust we are supposed to build with the community we serve." Her words were met with silence, though she could see the discomfort on some faces. She pressed on. "This isn't just about Harlan," she said, her gaze sweeping the room. "This is about all of us. It's about the culture we've allowed to fester. The unspoken rules, the quiet complacency, the unwillingness to hold each other accountable. That ends today." A hand shot up near the back of the room. It was Officer Rodriguez, one of the younger officers who had shown promise during the recent training sessions. "Captain," she said, her voice steady, "what happens next? How do we make sure this doesn't happen again?" Amelia nodded, appreciating the sincerity of the question. "What happens next," she said, "is a full department audit. Every complaint, every incident report, every use of force case from the past 5 years will be reviewed. Transparency will be our priority, and I'll be working directly with an independent oversight committee to ensure that this process is fair and thorough." The murmurs in the room grew louder, a mix of surprise and apprehension. Amelia raised a hand, silencing them. "I know this won't be easy," she said, "but it's necessary. This department needs to rebuild trust, not just with the community, but within its own ranks. And that starts with accountability." Later that day, Amelia met with the Oversight Committee, a group of community leaders, legal experts, and former law enforcement officers who had volunteered to assist with the audit. The meeting was tense but productive, with each member bringing their own perspective to the table. "Captain Johnson," said Marcia, the same community leader who had introduced her at the forum weeks earlier, "what do you hope to achieve with this audit?" "Change," Amelia replied without hesitation. "Real, tangible change. This department has to prove that it's willing to look inward, to confront its flaws, and correct them. That's the only way we can move forward." Marcia nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You've got a tough road ahead, Captain, but I believe in what you're trying to do." The audit began the following week, and as the review process unfolded, Amelia saw both the best and worst of her department. There were officers who stepped forward willingly, eager to be part of the solution. They shared their experiences, admitted their mistakes, and committed to doing better. But there were also those who resisted, who saw the audit as an attack rather than an opportunity for growth. One such officer was Harlan. Called in for an interview with the Oversight Committee, he arrived with an air of defiance, his body language stiff and his answers clipped. "This whole thing is a witch hunt," he said, glaring across the table at Amelia. "I've been on this force for 25 years. I know how to do my job." "No one is questioning your experience, Officer Harlan," Amelia replied evenly. "But experience doesn't excuse misconduct. We're here to understand what happened and why, so we can prevent it from happening again." Harlan scoffed but didn't argue further. The meeting continued, tense but productive, as the committee dug into the details of the traffic stop and the patterns of behavior that had led to it. As the audit progressed, Amelia found herself spending long hours at the precinct, often working late into the night. The weight of the responsibility she had taken on was immense, but she knew she couldn't falter. She was fighting not just for herself, but for every officer who wanted to do the right thing and for every community member who deserved better. One evening, as she sat alone in her office, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Officer Daniels. "Captain, just wanted to say thanks. I've learned a lot these past few weeks. I know I've got a long way to go, but I'm trying. I appreciate what you're doing for this department." Amelia smiled faintly, her heart lifting at the message. It was a small victory, but it reminded her why she was doing this. Change didn't happen all at once. It happened one person at a time. The culmination of the audit came in the form of a town hall meeting, where the Oversight Committee presented their findings to the community. The gymnasium was packed, the air buzzing with anticipation as Amelia took the stage alongside Marcia and other committee members. Marcia spoke first, outlining the results of the audit and the steps the department would take to address its shortcomings. When it was Amelia's turn, she stepped forward, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "This is just the beginning," she said, her gaze sweeping the crowd. "We've identified the problems, but now we have to fix them. That means new policies, new training, and a renewed commitment to the values we stand for. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight. But I promise you this, we will not stop until this department becomes one you can trust." Her words were met with a standing ovation, a rare moment of unity in a time of division. Amelia felt a surge of hope as she looked out at the crowd, seeing both officers and community members standing side by side. In the weeks that followed, the precinct began to shift. The resistance from within started to dwindle as more officers saw the value in the changes being implemented. Trust between the department and the community began to rebuild, slowly but surely. For Amelia, the journey was far from over. There were still challenges to face, still battles to fight. But as she walked through the precinct one morning, greeted by nods of respect and even a few smiles, she knew she had made a difference. And she wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot.